At 1:52 a.m., inside one of Ukraine's remote launch sites, a small team of operators was getting ready for a strike unlike anything before. Their target sat over 621 miles away, deep inside Russia's Leningrad Oblast, the massive oil refinery in Kirishi. This single facility processes 6% of all Russian oil, and if everything went according to plan, in 3 hours, that number would drop to zero. At 2:30 a.m., the lead operator triggered the launch sequence from inside his moving vehicle. The first FP-1 drone shot off the launch rail, its wings flexing under the load as it lifted into the air at 50 miles per hour. Every 15 seconds, another drone launched, each one banking northeast toward Russia. Meanwhile, the operators were already 1.2 miles away, speeding through forest roads with their headlights off, using only night vision goggles. Behind them, the empty launch site sat quietly, waiting for the Russian counterattack that would, ironically, hit an empty field. And this exact scene was happening all across Ukraine. In farmlands near Sumy, operators fired drones from hidden bunkers. On roadside bays near Chernihiv, trucks revealed concealed launch tracks. On factory rooftops in Kharkiv, maintenance crews turned out to be drone teams. A total of 361 drones launched in a perfectly timed sequence. But here's what made this operation different. The Kirishi strike package, despite having the longest route, launched last. That meant it had to fly faster, at 124 miles per hour, while drones heading for closer targets cruised at 93. This reverse timing ensured all 361 drones arrived within the same 20-minute window. Moscow, Bryansk, Smolensk, Rzhev, Kirishi, 5 major targets, hit at the exact same moment. Russian air defense commanders now had a choice. Which city do they try to save? And what happened next proved why their entire doctrine was doomed from the start. Russian radar operators in occupied Donetsk detected the launches within seconds. Their systems can track a baseball from 37 miles away. They saw 35 climbing drones. That data was instantly forwarded to headquarters. Computers in Moscow began calculating interception paths. Fighter pilots in Western Russia scrambled toward their jets. But they were about to learn a painful truth. Russia's air defense wasn't built for this. It was built to shoot down American B-2 bombers, worth billions. Their S-400 missiles cost $5 million each. Their fighters burned $10,000 in fuel every hour. Meanwhile, each Ukrainian FP-1 drone cost $50,000. This math alone was breaking Russian strategy. Shoot a $5 million missile at a $50,000 drone, or let it pass and risk losing a refinery worth billions. Every option was a loss. And the drones themselves were almost impossible to jam. Their receiver tracks both American GPS and Russian GLONASS satellites at the same time. If one system lies, the drone instantly knows. And then there's the backup, terrain contour matching. The drone constantly scans the ground with its radar altimeter, comparing terrain shapes with stored maps. So even if both satellite systems are jammed, it can read the Earth beneath it and stay on course. Its engine, a cheap Chinese 2-stroke motor you can buy online for $500, produces 6.5 horsepower, burns regular gasoline, and gives the drone a range of 1,000 miles. Ukraine didn't invent futuristic weapons. They took parts from a hobby shop and turned them into a strategic threat. But the warhead was all military. 176 pounds of tetrol detonating at 26,000 feet per second, wrapped in steel spheres that can punch through concrete from 656 feet away. By 2:15 a.m., all the strike packages merged into one massive swarm heading east. On Russian radar screens, 361 objects were now advancing toward dozens of targets at once. The question was no longer whether Russia saw them. They did. The question was whether they could stop them. At 2:52 a.m., the Kirishi strike package crossed into Belarusian airspace. The main swarm of 326 drones continued flying east toward Moscow and other secondary targets. This was the crucial moment. 35 drones broke away from the swarm and turned north, slipping between Belarusian defenses and Russian interceptors. Separated from the main group, one detection now would mean instant destruction. So the formation shifted into what Ukrainian operators call the ladder. At the top flew the Mugen 5 decoy drones, climbing to 9,840 feet, and loudly broadcasting signals on known drone control frequencies. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to be tracked. They wanted to take the hits. These commercial drones had been modified with aluminum corner reflectors, simple metal cubes that made them look massive on radar. Each one cost around $30,000, and each had one mission: go first, absorb fire, save the real strike package. Meanwhile, the real attack drones, the UJ-22s, held steady at 4,920 feet, forming the middle layer. Some carried 44-pound warheads, others carried ballast. To match the same flight profile. Their job? Pull missiles from Buk and Tor batteries, force Russia to burn through its ammunition. The striking FP-1 drones dropped to just 164 feet, vanishing into radar ground clutter. At that altitude, radar beams bounce off everything: trees, buildings, cars, drowning small objects in noise. And with Earth's curvature, a drone flying at 164 feet disappears from ground radar after only 18.6 miles. Physics became their shield. That was the brilliance of the latter. Each altitude layer defeated a different Russian defense system. High Mugins triggered S-400s and S-300s. Mid-UJ-22s absorbed short-range missile fire. Low FP-1s slipped through the blind zone at the bottom. And vertically, no single missile could hit more than one drone. A missile launched at 9,800 feet cannot strike something flying at 160 feet. From the Belarusian airbase at Baranovichi, a MiG-31 interceptor launched. It carried the powerful Zaslon-M radar, built to track a B-52 bomber from 186 miles away. But that power worked against it. The radar used narrow, precise beams meant for high-altitude targets. Trying to detect a tiny drone among treetops with it is like trying to snipe mosquitoes with a telescope. The pilots locked onto the high Mugen decoys, but Russian doctrine required visual confirmation before firing. That hesitation gave the true strike force enough time to slip 25 miles farther north. The decoys had done their job flawlessly, but ahead lay one of the deadliest systems in the world, the S-300 battery near Tikhina, famous for its brutal 9S1M2 Taraki radar. The Taraki jumps between X-band frequencies 100 times per second, 8 GHz, 12, 10, 9, never repeating. It's almost impossible to jam. Before you react, it's already somewhere else. But Ukraine had learned its weakness. Every 10 seconds, the radar must reset its hopping algorithm, and for exactly half a second, it stops transmitting. Half a second of darkness, half a second of opportunity. One of the Mugins climbed deliberately to 16,400 feet. The S-300 fired a $3 million 9M82M missile at the $50,000 drone. 2 seconds before impact, the dying Mugin transmitted the radar's timing pattern to the entire swarm. Its sacrifice synchronized the group. 27 seconds later, right as the radar entered its half-second blind spot, every remaining drone dropped to 33 feet. For that fraction of a second, they vanished. When the radar came back, they were buried in ground clutter. Operators saw nothing but interference. No targets, no missile launches. The swarm slipped through, untouched. Next came Russia's electronic warfare zone. The Pol-21 system activated Meakening, recording real GPS signals and replaying them with a delay. Suddenly, drones saw themselves flying over empty fields, even though they were crossing cities. 5 minutes of completely falsified navigation. But the FP-1s adapted. They switched to backup mode, magnetic compass, plus counting how many times they crossed high-voltage power lines. Between the border and Kirishi, there were 7 such power lines along the Moscow-St. Petersburg corridor. Those lines became their map. 2 drones drifted off course after passing over an iron ore deposit, which distorted their compass by 30 degrees. 3 more followed the wrong power lines toward Finland. But the lead drone, its count was accurate. It stayed on the true course, toward Kirishi. With 24 drones left, the strike package pushed forward through thick morning fog. The refinery was close now. At 6 a.m., the bright industrial lights of Kirishi finally appeared, a city that never sleeps. It was protected by 4 Pantsir batteries, positioned so their ranges overlapped. The remaining 20 UJ-22 drones split into 5 teams of 4, each assigned to overwhelm a single pantsir. Russian radar operators were cornered. They saw all 20 drones on their screens, but each pantsir could fire only 4 missiles at a time. Once those missiles were airborne, the system needed 15 seconds before it could target again. Ukraine used the pantsir's greatest strength, precision, and turned it into a crippling weakness. At 6:18 a.m., 16 Pantsir missiles launched at once. Their rocket engines lit up the pre-dawn sky like an artificial sunrise. The UJ-22 drones tried to evade, but against missiles pulling 30 Gs, physics wasn't on their side. 12 UJ-22s vanished in bright fireballs. Their sacrifice gave the real attackers a few precious seconds. While the missiles were in the air, and the Pantsirs were blind to new threats for 15 seconds, the FP-1 strike drones slipped through the gap. By the time the missiles hit the decoys, the FP-1s were already inside minimum range, and the Pantsirs needed 45 seconds to reload. The FP-1s needed only 30 seconds to enter cannon distance. For once, the math favored the attackers. The Pantsirs switched to their twin 30mm cannons, firing ammunition with preset fuses. Each round released 360 tungsten pellets, and the fire control computer predicted where every drone would be when those pellets arrived. It built deadly clouds along each flight path, but Ukraine had programmed altitude changes every 2 seconds. Up 33 feet, down 16, up 10, down 26. With no pattern the computer could learn, the Pantsirs fired at where the drones should have been, not where they actually were. 3 FP-1s flew straight into a tungsten cloud and were shredded. One drone clipped the edge of a blast. Half a wing tore away, but somehow it kept flying, the gyros fighting with everything they had. 6 FP-1s made it out of cannon range, now just 1,640 feet from the refinery. The Pantsirs couldn't lower their barrels any further without risking friendly fire. The main line of defense had been breached, but Russia had one more weapon waiting. 3 surviving drones crossed the refinery boundary at 6:18 a.m., entering the strike zone of Russia's newest system, the PVO-20, mounted on a BMP-3 chassis. Its 57mm automatic cannon was already tracking them. This wasn't a standard AA gun. It was built specifically to destroy drone swarms. Each round carried a programmable fuse. A laser rangefinder measured the drone's distance. The fuse was programmed on the spot, and the projectile exploded just before reaching the target, sending 200 tungsten balls outward at lethal speed. The PVO's computer began calculating a barrage mode, a 3-dimensional net of overlapping kill zones. 980 feet, 820, 650, 490. Nothing should have survived flying through it. The barrel rose, locking onto the lead drone at 656 feet. But then, a fatal flaw in the system appeared. Below 328 feet, the tungsten balls might strike the refinery, rupturing chemical tanks, spilling volatile fuel, and triggering the very disaster the system was designed to prevent. This safety rule was written permanently into the fire control computer. It could not be bypassed, not even in combat. At 6:18:00, the PVO fired. The first round exploded 656 feet from the lead drone. Too far. The second exploded at 590 feet. Closer. The third was calculated to be exact. The FP-1 tried to dive, but the controls lagged. The round detonated 26 feet from the drone. 200 tungsten balls hit at 4,900 feet per second. The plywood fuselage disintegrated instantly. The fuel tank ruptured. The engine tore free. The drone spiraled downward, scattering debris across the refinery. The second drone reached 390 feet. The PVO tracked it flawlessly. 360, 345, 330. One more round in the barrel. At 328 feet, the system froze. The computer refused to fire. The drone was tracked perfectly, but the system would not shoot and risk hitting the refinery. Manual mode. Blocked. Direct fire. Denied. The system chose to protect the facility and let 2 drones pass. A catastrophic mistake. At 6:19 a.m., the first FP-1 struck the CDU-100 unit, exactly where intelligence had predicted. 55 pounds of tetryl, detonating at 26,000 feet per second, generated a 100 psi shockwave. Corroded supports failed instantly. Crude oil at 716 degrees Fahrenheit and 30 atmospheres burst from ruptured pipes. The superheated liquid vaporized on contact with air. A massive fuel-air explosion rolled across the complex. 10 seconds later, the second drone hit the seal of tank number 47. The trapped vapors ignited instantly. The tank's floating roof, 50 tons of steel, lifted into the sky, flew 656 feet, and crashed into the administration building, crushing it. 80,000 barrels of oil spilled into the inferno. The fire grew exponentially, climbing into the morning sky. The collapse spread rapidly. The fractionation column lost pressure, triggering an instantaneous phase transition. A classic Blevy explosion. The 131-foot column split at the welds. The top section launched 2,625 feet like a steel rocket. Shockwaves tore open 6 more storage tanks. Emergency systems failed. No pressure, ruptured pipes, jammed valves. The refinery was destroying itself from the inside. The Kurishi refinery, 355,000 barrels per day, 6.4% of Russia's total processing capacity, was gone. Satellite images confirmed what Russia denied for days. CDU-100 destroyed. Catalytic cracking destroyed. Partial repairs would take at least 6 months. Full capacity might never return. Russia claimed all drones were intercepted, but the fire visible from space told the real story. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.